From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones.
I was actually quite excited about joining Hinge. It's sort of seen as this dating app that's designed to be deleted, so you're probably going to meet someone that's worth your time. So I downloaded the app pretty hastily. I'd chosen my most wholesome photographs and I was swiping away and I came across Edward and we got chatting. We had loads in common. It flowed really easily. We eventually met up for a few drinks. He got on there first and he'd ordered us 2 cocktails. I think deep down I probably would have gone for a pint, but he didn't know that yet about me. And the conversation flowed really easily. We spoke about our families, where we're from, our work, and he was absolutely lovely. We had a really good time.
So should we save a date?
No, it didn't work out. So it sort of fizzled after that. It's like the initial connection was great. It just didn't amount to anything. It was sort of not enough of a connection for it to progress, which actually seemed to be quite a common experience for me on dating apps.
It's January, so you might be thinking this is the year to find a partner. Or maybe ditch the current one. If you've been eyeing up dating apps thinking that might help, maybe think again.
I am toying with going back on dating apps. And I set up some profiles and I remembered exactly why I hate them.
Since I re-download the apps, almost every single time, this is exactly what keeps happening. They keep pushing the date back until I just have to say, hey, I'm not going anymore. Because that's disrespectful as my time and me as a person.
Dating apps these days, I hate them. I'm not a fan. I'll be on them now and then. And sometimes you find a diamond in the rough. And then there's just one thing. There's one thing that don't work. Never works out.
Official figures appear to back this up. For the first time ever, there's been a year-on-year fall in users across the UK's most popular dating apps. So why are many of us dumping the dating app? And what on earth are we doing instead? The story today, why we're falling out of love with dating apps.
I'm Hannah Skelley. I'm the fashion writer and stylist on the Times fashion desk.
And what had all of your dating life been like pre-apps?
I'd always sort of met my partners in real life and sort of in quite random places. I'd met partners at weddings. I'd met one of my boyfriends at Glastonbury. I've ended up talking to people on the tube in the big Tesco near where I live.
On the tube? Hang on, Hannah. Yeah. On the tube? Who gets a date on the tube? I thought it was just sort of hate crimes that happen on the tube.
I think it's just because I'm a chatty northerner. I'm from Hull in Yorkshire, so I don't think it's weird when people talk on public transport, but I think a lot of people do probably think it's a bit odd.
But you got an actual boyfriend out of that?
Yeah, I did actually, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'd kind of met these people in the spaces that I frequent, but none of them had actually really amounted to anything. And I was 27 at the time, and my editor, she found out that at age 27, I had never been on a dating app. So she said, why don't you try these dating apps, see what they're all about, see if you meet anyone on there. And that's sort of how I ended up getting into it and doing this crazy experiment of 6 dates in 1 week.
Okay, so what was the plan then? Which ones did you download and how long did you give yourself?
I basically had a week to do this experiment. It's a love experiment. And I downloaded Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, Thursday, Field and Raya, the 6 most popular we could find.
Okay, I've heard of Tinder and I've heard of Hinge. Bumble is the one, isn't it, where the woman has to sort of make the first move if you match. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what on earth are Thursday, Field and Raya?
Field is a great app for alternative love.
Define alternative.
I think if you're looking for open relationships, if you're looking for multiple partners within one relationship, if you have any kinks.
To quote Alan Partridge, is it for sex people?
It's for sex people. Yeah, exactly. So going on there, I felt extremely vanilla, I felt really out of place, to be frank. And everyone sort of lists their kinks in their bios as like a shopping list. It's absolutely intimidating.
Wow. And what about Thursday and Raya?
Thursday is a fun one because it's basically a time-limited app. So it's only open on a Thursday for you to swipe and find matches. And you've got basically until midnight. It felt like Cinderella. Raya, I would say it's like the Instagram of dating apps. It's basically full of Z-list celebrities and influencers, and everyone's photos are super polished. They've all got massive filters on them. They're all in amazing locations. It feels quite posh and it's very exclusive. It's quite hard to get onto. I had to be referred by a couple of people and then I had to wait to be accepted.
And how did you find them all? Which of the apps rose to the surface as being the most fruitful?
The worst one for me was Tinder. I found that absolutely chronic. I found that like a real sort of hunting ground for horny men, essentially. My profile got a lot of attention very quickly. I felt very uncomfortable by some of the messages I was receiving. Thursday was fine. It was quite nice to have a 1 week a day commitment. Didn't feel like it was completely taking over my life. Raya, it was pretty elitist and everyone on there was pretty boring. I feel like everyone was sort of posing rather than actually getting to know anybody. And I think it's sort of a brag if you say, oh, I'm on Raya. But actually, are you meeting anyone? Are you actually finding love on there? Probably not. Bumble was great. That was nice because it's sort of the woman that makes the first move, which feels quite empowering. Hinge is pretty standard. It feels pretty average. And Field is an experience. I actually ended up on a date with a couple. Unbeknownst to me, I thought I was going to meet one guy and he showed up with his current girlfriend and they were basically looking for someone to join them in the bedroom. It turned out she had chosen me as much as he had. So it was fun, but it's not for me.
Well, it all goes on, doesn't it? What were your better dates?
I didn't meet anyone that was terrible on these apps. I want to make that really clear. It was just that I didn't really meet people I felt super connected to. And I also felt on these apps that everyone was kind of disposable, that I was disposable, that you can just keep swiping and there's thousands of possibilities, but actually no one is that connected.
And are you the odd one out in your friendship group? Is everyone else swiping like nobody's business?
Not at all. My girlfriends have definitely stopped bothering really with apps. They'll occasionally go on them to check if they've matched with anybody, but actually a lot of the time it ends up being a screenshot to laugh at in the girls' chat with the suggestions they've been given or whoever they've come across. So it's become a bit of a meme even, the kind of people that you meet on these apps.
And then it's back on the London Underground to see who's on there.
Exactly. Who's in the big Tesco this week by the avocados? Who can I chat up there? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting then you say that, people aren't feeling necessarily as happy with the apps as maybe we think they are, because we have these figures from Ofcom, the communications regulator, suggesting that actually for the first time ever, user numbers are down on these matchmaking platforms. What do these figures actually show us?
Ofcom has said that the UK's four most popular dating apps have actually seen a massive decline in their users since last year. So Tinder is down 600,000 users, which is 5%. Hinge is down 131,000 people, that's 3%. Bumble is down 368,000, which is 2.3%. And Grindr is down 11,000, which is 1.9%.
And is it the case that they're not as interested, or are they just maybe moving to, the new flashy dating app on the scene?
Ofcom said that Sniffies and Scruff, two apps marketed at the LGBT community, had entered the top 10 most popular, but that actually doesn't account for the losses on those other apps.
Yes. And in the grand scheme of things, this isn't some sort of mass exodus, is it? But I guess it's interesting that the numbers are declining for the first time.
There's been this slight decline on some apps. Obviously, some are bigger than others, but actually it's the first sort of fall we've seen in the amount of users on them. This could really be a sign of things to come.
And I mean, it's even affecting business for some of the companies.
Yes, in July, Match Group, which owns Tinder, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, and OkCupid, announced that it would actually be cutting 6% of its global workforce because of a slump in users. So it is actually affecting them in terms of money.
Interesting. I didn't know that one group owned all those different outlets, or whatever the phrase is. Do we know anything about who is leaving?
I think it's a massive mix of people. I know that my own peers, so in their early to late 20s, they're losing interest in them massively. But it's also millennials who are early adopters that have had the apps for about a decade now. They're probably burning out and feel like they've failed if they haven't found someone on there by now. Gen Z, I don't think they're engaged at all. I think they're all too busy on TikTok, to be honest with you. Last year, a poll of students in the United States by Axios and Generation Lab suggested that 79% of them use them less than once a month, which isn't very much at all, considering that I went on 6 in a week.
So, Hannah and some people like her across the generations seem to be falling out of love with dating apps. But what is the science behind this? How do the apps match people? And is the problem really our own expectations or the design of the algorithms? I went in search of an expert, someone who's been researching all of this for years, to find out.
I'm Liesel Sharabi. I'm an associate professor in the Hugh Downs School of Human Communication at Arizona State University.
And what are your areas of interest?
I study communication technologies and interpersonal relationships. So what I'm really interested in is how technology is changing the way that we meet partners, the way that we date, and how we fall in love.
Have you yourself had need of dating apps?
I actually have not used the apps, and I think that it makes me objective because everything I know really does come from my research and it comes from my participants. But I have been known to swipe for friends on occasion.
Which is sort of cheating to get a professional involved.
A little bit. Yeah, I keep that secret between us, though.
And we are speaking to you and doing this episode because there's some stats out there that suggest people are leaving these apps. Are you surprised at that suggestion, or is that as you'd expect?
No, I mean, this is what we've also been seeing here in the US. My colleagues and I just published a paper on dating app burnout because I think that dating apps really have reached their burnout era. I think people are feeling frustrated. They're starting to question the motives of the platforms. And I also think that there's this really interesting nostalgia right now that people have for meeting in person, where they're almost like romanticizing the idea of meeting. Here, people call this like meeting in the wild, meeting organically.
Because it's sort of vintage.
It's vintage, right? You know, it used to be when I started studying this, online dating was the novel thing to do. Like, why are you online dating? And now it's meeting face to face. That is the novel thing.
Well, let's have a look at some of the facts then, because if we think about the whole dating pool as a pie, how big is the dating app market as opposed to people meeting someone in real life?
In the US, dating apps are the single most common way to meet a partner. I don't know exactly how that compares to the UK, but I would have to imagine that it would be pretty similar.
And yet there are people feeling a dating app burnout, as you suggested, and you hinted at some of the reasons, but take us through some of those. What are people saying about why they are feeling burnt out with these apps? Why it's not quite delivering what they'd hoped?
I think that one thing that's happening is that there has not been a lot of innovation in this space. I mean, when dating apps came out, they were really new and they were exciting, and it was this different way to meet people, even compared to the online dating sites that came before them. And I think that now it's starting to feel maybe a little bit stale. I also think that we're starting to see some of the long-term effects. We have our success stories, people who went on the apps with a specific goal and they were able to accomplish it. But we're also seeing people that have been on there from the beginning or, you know, for a number of years and they haven't had any luck with it and they're feeling frustrated and they're feeling exhausted. I think it's both an issue of quantity and quality. So one thing apps do really well is give you the quantity. They give you options. They expand your dating pool. But also that's a whole lot of work then that's required of the individual user to actually find what it is they're looking for. So what I hear from people is that they feel like they've got this really big pool, but finding those quality options and the people that they would actually be interested in, that's a lot more challenging.
So how do the apps end up matching us? How does the algorithm work it out?
So a lot of apps today are using something called collaborative filtering, where they're essentially making recommendations based on people who seem to have similar taste as you. So you're swiping on profiles, indicating that you like certain types of people. And these platforms have data also about others who also like the same profiles. And so they're able to use that to then offer up more recommendations to you. It's very similar to Netflix. So if you think about how streaming services work, this is the comparison I always use. You watch a movie, and then at the end, it's going to recommend a few more movies that others like you have also watched and enjoyed. And so dating apps are kind of doing something similar. And so you do want to be mindful and careful about who you're swiping left or right on, because that is how it's figuring out your taste in partners. But I mean, the apps, the algorithms are proprietary. You know, no app is going to be incredibly forthcoming about the process, but these are some inferences we can make about how they work across the board.
People like you have previously enjoyed this person, you might enjoy them as well.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And I wonder, how has all of this changed us as consumers, if I can use that phrase? Are we approaching possible dates in a different way to than we might in the real world?
I hear people say it feels like shopping. It feels a little bit like these are products and not real people. And some of that is by design. I mean, the algorithms that dating apps use work very similarly to the types of algorithms that e-commerce platforms, things like Amazon, use. And so it is, you know, you're swiping on people, and these are real human beings with real feelings. And sometimes it's easy to forget that as you're going through profiles so quickly.
And I guess that means you could miss out on somebody who might be a perfect match for you, because you're using different metrics than you might do if you met them in the real world.
Yeah, I think it creates a certain mindset where a lot of people go to online dating with kind of this wish list and this image in their mind of what the perfect partner looks like. And then their task is now to find that person. Yeah. When really we know that relationships, you know, it's about finding the right person, but also building the right relationship with them and kind of putting in the work to make it what you want. And so I think that mindset that's created by all of this is also part of the problem at the same time. You're spending a lot of time looking for something that might not necessarily exist.
And does that mean that relationships that come out of dating apps are actually maybe built on shakier foundations than one in the real world?
It depends. You know, some of my research has looked at the success stories. I have I've spoken to people who have found the love of their life through dating apps. But at the same time, when you look across the population of the people who are meeting this way and you look at the quality of their relationships, some of my other research has shown that it's a little bit lower on average than people who are meeting through more traditional routes. And so you have to ask yourself, why? Is it something about the people who are opting into online dating? Is it something about the process? Is it something about having a shakier foundation, as you said? I think we're still working to figure that out.
And is part of that explained by how the apps are actually set up as businesses and decide to make money?
Yeah, and this is the million-dollar question, right? Like, what is the goal of the platform? How does this business model work exactly? And is it aligned with what users are actually looking for? And so on the one hand, you know, I don't think that there's some big conspiracy where the apps are just trying to keep all of us single and trying to make sure none of us find relationships. But at the same time, I think that there is this question that people are starting to ask. And, you know, I think it's a good question of how it works exactly.
And I was struck by something you said a moment ago where you said there hasn't really been a lot of innovation in these apps, even in the last decade. Because to my mind, I'd think, well, you're always seeing new apps coming out, new dating apps. But actually, correct me if I'm wrong, they're all built around that same swipe this way or that way. Here's a photo, here's some information, yes or no. And then if you match with somebody, you're allowed to chat. That's basically it across the board, really.
Yeah, and I mean, at first, the swiping mechanism, that was really innovative compared to how online dating used to work, where you would go and you would browse profiles, like the swiping left and right. At the time, that was something really new and really cool. But since then, I mean, we see new platforms coming up all the time, but nothing has really changed. I mean, during COVID, a lot of these platforms started to roll out like video dating features, but from what I've been seeing, it hasn't really caught on the way some people expected. So the process hasn't changed a lot in quite a while. And even when you look at the platforms, a lot of them are owned by the same company. I mean, they work pretty similarly. I don't think that this is exactly the perfect format. I think even the platforms are starting to look at AI and they're starting to look at newer technologies to figure out, is there a better way to do things? You know, the swiping is convenient for people. One thing that it's done really brilliantly is take some of the rejection out of dating, because in order to have a conversation with somebody, you have to know that they're already interested in you. So that was something that swiping did that was at the time very innovative.
And do we know who benefits most from all of this? Like, what works well in that current setup? What kind of profiles?
I do think that profile photos can be helpful for also letting people see you in context. It's kind of like a show and tell that you do in a profile. So you talk about what you're interested in, and then you show it through your photographs. And so, you know, you can say you like to snowboard or you like to go hiking on the weekend, but it's kind of like, okay, show me.
But snowboarding while still looking hot.
That's always helpful.
Still need to look good while you're doing it. So updating your profile if you feel like you're not having good luck is a very good tip. What other tips are out there to get the best out of what we currently have?
I think that making it easy for people to start a conversation with you is always helpful. And so I've heard of people putting almost like prompts in the profile, inviting questions, asking questions, saying something like, you know, I'm new to the area. I love coffee shops if anybody has a recommendation, so that if somebody wants to message you, they know exactly what to say. They don't have to kind of labor over it. And then also it's thinking about how to really distinguish, like differentiate yourself, make yourself stand out from everybody else in the pool. And so, you know, talking about how much you like to eat or how you like to take naps on the weekend may be true, but isn't necessarily going to make you different from the typical person.
Quite. The other thing you hear is that it is a numbers game, and to get a successful outcome, you need to be just swiping, dating.
I can see how it feels like that at times. And I would argue that one of the best things to do is make it not a numbers game, like set some limits on how much you're swiping. And when you do actually see somebody who you're interested in, try to put in some effort to see where that conversation goes. Give them a chance. That would be my argument, and really spend some time with a couple of people who you're genuinely interested in.
And what about once you've made the conversion, say, from chatting a little bit on the app to then meeting in the flesh? Lots of people find that that's when things might falter, because you found they were really good chat on the app, but now I'm sitting opposite them in a coffee shop or a bar. Good grief, get me out of here. Do you have any tips for that point?
I think that's a really common experience. Sometimes the first date isn't magical. It's not like what you see in the movies. It's not always love at first sight. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't go somewhere. I mean, this is something I've seen in some of my research, looking at people in long-term relationships from dating apps. You know, it took a couple of dates to really start to feel like they were clicking. And so everyone's experience is different, but I think having realistic expectations when you're meeting somebody for the first time is also important.
Has all of this made us worse daters in real life? If you spend a lot of your time swiping, on those rare occasions that you are at a bar trying to make eyes at somebody, have we sort of lost how to deal with that situation?
This is something that was really striking to me. I was doing some interviews with participants. There's one person I spoke to. He was younger. I believe he was in his early 20s. And I was asking him how he meets people. And he was telling me that all of his significant relationships had started through either a dating app or social media. And so I was asking him, you know, if you're at a bar, you know, would you approach somebody? And he was like, I don't know. I've never had to do that. And
how would you do that?
How would you? Like, how would you? And I've heard this from other people. Like, they'll see people out in real life, out in the real world, and they won't approach them and hope that they just happen to find them on the apps later because they don't want to put themselves out there.
Do you think dating apps are in terminal decline, or do they still have a use? And how do you think they should maybe evolve if they want to still stake a good share of the dating game?
I don't think that they're going to go away, but I do see them changing, especially in the next couple of years. I think that there is this real craving for something new and something different, whether it's meeting in person or, a different version of dating apps than what we have now. I think AI is going to be really pivotal in all of this. And so right now, people are using AI on dating apps. Maybe some of the people listening have been using AI. They're using it to help them create profiles, to help them write messages. And so just on a basic level, I think the platforms are going to have to decide whether they want that to be a part of the experience, whether it's something they're going to try to fight. And then also thinking about all the ways that AI might improve dating apps, how it could cut down on the amount that people are having to swipe and really help people find better matches, or meeting people virtually before you meet in person. I think there are all kinds of possibilities there.
I mean, when you look to where all this is going in the future, are you happy about it, or does some of it still slightly depress you?
I tend to be an optimist about all of this because I realize there are problems, but I also think there's so much potential here. And I think that it's hard to imagine cutting technology out of our dating lives. So I think the question to be asking is, how can we make this work better for people? Because we know it's not working perfectly now. So how can we design experiences that are actually going to help people accomplish their goals?
Hannah, you were telling us earlier about your foray into the dating apps, unfruitful as it was. What's your current strategy? Are you on them? Are you off them? Are you dating anyone?
So I was probably on the dating apps since my editor asked me to join them for about 6 months in the end. I sort of gave up on them in March earlier this year. I felt burnt out. I didn't feel I was meeting in-depth connections on them. So yeah, I gave up on them and thought I'd go back to my usual method of bumping into people or meeting people when you meet people. But actually, I'm dating a guy now. He's rather lovely, and I met him IRL in real life, which is nice.
Whereabouts? Was it the Northern Line or the bread aisle at Tesco? Where was it?
Actually, neither. It turns out that we actually met years ago in Brixton, although I don't remember because I was possibly a few too many drinks down. However, I kept bumping into him in the gym, in our coffee shop, there's tennis courts near my house, and he kept sort of acknowledging me and saying hi. And I thought, God, who is this boy? I must know him. And then I went for dinner at my uni friend's house, and he was there. He lives there. And then he said, you obviously don't remember that we met all these years ago. But yeah,
But all
so
good.
we just went there. Yeah, we decided to go for a drink, and we've been dating for a few months now, which is lovely.
Do you have any advice for anyone feeling a bit burned out by these apps? Maybe in the new year, looking to shake up their dating life a bit. What would you suggest?
I think if you're feeling burnt out by these apps and feeling disappointed by these apps, I think it's a real universal feeling. You're not the odd one out. And I think the best thing to do is sort of come off them for a while, reassess what you're really looking for. I'd say most of my girlfriends now have met dates sort of playing sport, at run clubs, in the gym, even in the pub again. I think if you want to talk to someone, talk to them. Don't be embarrassed. We've all got to accept rejection. If you get it in real life, I think that's better than getting it on an app, to be honest with you. That would be my advice.
We approached Match Group for comment. They're the ones who own Tinder, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, Match.com, OkCupid, and a number of other online dating sites. And they told us, quote, "We understand that dating is personal and not every experience will be perfect. However, Match Group is actively leading industry-first innovations to make dating better, safer, and more intentional." That's it from us today. You've been listening to Hannah Skelley, fashion writer and stylist at The Times, and Dr. Liesel Sharabi, Associate Professor of Human Communication and Director of the Relationships and Technology Lab at Arizona State University. Today's producer was Olivia Case. The executive producer was Taryn Siegel.
The sound design is by David Crackles, and the theme was composed by Mal Assetto.
And I'm Luke Jones. Happy swiping.